One of the projects that I'm sure you remember, Jayne, and I remember very well, is the one that I was allowed to do in 1988 involving tracing the evolution of organic sustainable agriculture and going clear back to 1580 or whenever it was. And that was a very enjoyable project and a very inspiring one. The publication is still in print and people still ask for it.
Yes,
and I thank you again for giving me that assignment. I, as you said, came in 1988 for 6 months and then came back in 1989 on a permanent basis, and we had some fun over the years and accomplished quite a bit. One of the things I remember, again, that you were kind enough to do was to take me along when you went to conferences, because in traveling around the country I learned to know even more, and I also learned a lot of people. You're very well known to a lot of people out there in the hinterlands.
I felt the conferences were a major part of our role. It was so important to learn everything that was being said and researched, and it was also important for us to let people know that we were available to help. We did, as you remember, exhibits of our services.
Surprised a lot of people.
At a lot of these conferences, people who had never even heard of the National Agricultural Library. It doesn't do any good for us to be here with this wonderful collection if people don't know that they can make use of it. And tracing the evolution reminds me, weren't we fortunate to be working in a place where the collection goes back to the 1500s, and everything that you could want to cite was available.
More than we could really mention, but enough that it did truly bring it forward to the present time. In remembering the conferences we went to, Jayne, are there some that stand out in your mind? I know there are some that stand out in mine.
Yes. One at the end of 1988, in September 1988, was the first USDA sponsored conference on sustainable agriculture, held in the administration building, and invited many people from around the country who had been working on their own in this field and who never dreamed that the Department of Agriculture would be inviting them to speak.
It was really a historic event, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Isn't that the one where Robert Rodale spoke?
Yes, he did. I did.
Yes.
What's his name from California? The guy with the ponytail.
It'll come to you.
Yes, it will. Well, all kinds of wonderful people from around the country, because this program that was in the building then was meant to include not just government people, not just university people, but farmers, ranchers, extension people. It was meant to be a cooperative deal, and it has been. Another conference which followed that closely was the one at Ohio State that we went to. It was the first international conference on sustainable agriculture, hosted by Clive Edwards and a good committee.
We also did a videotaped interview when we were in Iowa.
Yes.
In the snow, as I remember.
Iowa was wonderful. That was Richard and Sharon Thompson's farm in February, and we sat in his kitchen while you talked about his innovations and his willingness to teach other farmers what he's learned by trial and error, and his work in ridge tillage and the other things he's been pretty famous for. We did interviews while we were at a conference in Nebraska.
In Lincoln, yes.
Yes. There was a very fine conference on sustainable agriculture there, and at the time we interviewed two of the speakers and coordinators of the conference, Chuck Francis and Fred Kirschenman.
Yes.
Yes. And so we were able to do some of this work at the same time as we were doing other things.
Coordinating it.
Some of the more entertaining and interesting conferences were the Asilomar conferences sponsored by the California, let's see, what is it?
Sustainable Agriculture?
Sustainable Agriculture.
Committee.
Yes.
Yes. Committee for Sustainable Agriculture. CSA.
Yeah.
We're back into acronyms
That
again.
also brought together people from, let's say there's a spectrum of people in sustainable agriculture, the pure organic farmers at one end and the ones who are just beginning to think of reducing their chemicals on the other end. And the people from farming and from academia, from government, all seem to meet at the Asilomar conferences.
Yes, it's a wide spectrum of people attend that.